Hoping I'll be able to go home on time, but this.
I was gonna reach out to you.
We're just gonna have a coordinating day.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm sure we will have some more folks joining, trickling in as we continue, but just a couple of the little housekeeping things right away. My name is Sadie. I am just hanging out here to watch the online comments coming in. Your presenters are online and in person. This is the Navigating Federal Funding Landscape for Limited Capacity Communities. If you are looking for a different meeting, it's okay to excuse yourself. We will go here until 10:30. Everyone online is already muted, so you are good to go. If you would like to participate by asking a question within the Whova app, you are welcome to. You can either do it on your phone, or if you have your laptop with you, when you open it up on the right-hand side, if you're in the session, you'll see the Q&A as well as a chat. Let's see. You are also able to network with everybody else here. You all have your own profile, connect with one another. You can scan your business card in there and stuff and send it to each other. So hopefully you'll make some connections within the session and chat afterwards as well. First, I will introduce our speakers here just very briefly. We have Catherine Kemp here, who's from Minnesota and Great Plains Institute. We have Michaela Lynch here, who is from Bloomington, Indiana, with the city. And we have Dr. Aaron Delat here, who is a professor at Indiana University, and they'll give you a little bit more about themselves.
I'm trying to figure out how to show my co-panelists here, but we'll make it work. We'll make it work. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Catherine Kemp. I'm from the Great Plains Institute. Super excited to be with you all today, talking about, how do we kind of navigate this super new and exciting, kind of overwhelming federal funding landscape. Just to give you a quick overview of our presentation, then we'll do some intros of our panel. We're going to be talking about some of the needs that we've been hearing from local governments, from organizations that are supporting limited capacity communities and trying to access this federal funding. Hear about some resources that are available, and then hear about how one city, Bloomington, Indiana, is approaching this landscape. To quickly introduce myself, again, I'm Catherine, I'm a program manager with the Great Plains Institute. GPI is a national nonprofit working across the Midwest and across the country, based in Minneapolis, though, working to transform the energy system for the benefit of people, the environment, and the economy. And I'll talk a bit more about GPI later, but I'll turn it over to Aaron first to introduce himself, and then we'll go to Michaela.
All right, great. Thank you, Catherine. So hopefully everyone can hear me. Sorry, I am not there in person. COVID prevented me from making it over to the conference this week. I'm sure you're not satisfied that I'm not there personally. My name is Aaron Delat. I'm assistant professor at Indiana University Bloomington in the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. And what we're going to try to sort of do for you today is initially present kind of an overview of the landscape, as the slide title says. Can you advance to the next slide, please? And this kind of overview is focused on how ready or how prepared local communities are for this generational investment in resilience and climate action. We heard last night from EPA's Deputy Administrator Janet McCabe that EPA is going to need to hire approximately 2,000 employees this year. They are, for those of you who have tracked EPA's woes, they are at the lowest level of staffing currently since the Reagan administration. So they are going to be themselves very resource constrained over the next year, and grappling with that as they try to roll out some $100 billion or so, and that's just the one federal agency. We're also concerned from the local government perspective or the community perspective about capacity constraints and the inability to access these resources, or at least to access them equitably. And so my research lab last year, if you want to advance the slide, please,
really struggling here. There we go.
Thank you. So my research lab last year, after the infrastructure bill passed and prior to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, decided to conduct a baseline survey or study of municipal governments in the United States to ascertain what their capacity limits were or capacity constraints. And we have several kind of waves of similar data over the last 15 years or so, so we can sort of track a trajectory for how cities are growing or not growing their internal capacities. And what we found is sort of a mixed bag. And so just a quick kind of overview of the study. This was a national survey. It was sent to all municipalities, 19,000 in population and up. We had a response of about 415 cities. This was conducted again late spring into the early summer prior to the passage of IRA. And it was conducted by myself and then a couple of my colleagues at the University of Illinois at Chicago and the University of Kansas. Next slide, please. And so I want to jump into some of the findings. First off, we found that approximately 2/3 of cities in this sort of sweet spot of cities that are between roughly 20 and 50,000 in population, about 2/3 of those cities did have some sort of funding for sustainability through their general fund. This is quite a bit of an improvement over about 10 years ago, where that number would have been somewhere around 10%. And so a big increase in sort of the number of cities that are using general funds to pay for some sustainability initiatives. As we'll hear from Bloomington, that it can be problematic as well when you have limited staff to manage those resources. But when we look at other sources of funding, particularly competitive grants, those are far less utilized by local governments. And this is where we have some bit of concern because as Administrator McCabe mentioned last night, the EPA is really transitioning here into a competitive grant evaluation organization, right? They're going to be having to kind of sort through and evaluate thousands of grant applications. And for a lot of cities in our survey, they don't have experience in writing grants, and they don't have experience in handling or managing or implementing grant-funded projects. So we also found approximately 1 in 4 cities had reported no funding at all for sustainability efforts. I don't have this in the slide, but it would probably not surprise anyone in the room to hear that typically poorer, lower income communities and communities with higher proportions of Black and brown neighborhoods also are statistically less likely to have funding or resources for sustainability efforts. All right, next slide. So we found also in the study that about 6 in 10 cities had no dedicated staffing for sustainability initiatives. So we want to look at that as the glass half full. About 40% of our respondents did. That also is an increase from 10 years ago. The last time the federal government made any kind of sizable financial commitment to climate action or energy was in 2009 when the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act passed. That legislation had an energy efficiency and conservation block grant program, about $3 billion. At that time, only about 10% of cities across the country had any dedicated sustainability staff. Today, that average ranged from about 10 to 15%. Today, that is higher, right? About 40% or so of cities are reporting they do have staff. But fewer than 1 in 4 had any kind of sustainability task force or team with members from multiple departments engaged. Sometimes these are called green teams. They become pretty critical for trying to develop a climate action plan or a sustainability plan and actually implement that, because any of you who've had any experience in this space will know the actions or activities that you have to engage in. They don't stay centered in just a sustainability office. They kind of span all of the individual silos or departments of cities. So as a result of that, you need to have a large number of departments. You need to have planning, public works, sanitation, community development, economic development, those kinds of agencies or departments involved in sustainability initiatives. And to do that, you have to try to coordinate across these different departments, and that coordination is by and large not happening across the country. Next slide, please. So we also asked specifically about their preparation for using infrastructure funding. Remember, this was before IRA was adopted, but it was about 6 to 9 months after the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed. And so we expected there to be a lot of activity across the country in terms of trying to get ready and just plan. And we found that was not the case at all. So looking into the future, only 1 in 10 cities had established any kind of task force or team to explore funding opportunities. That can in part maybe be because a lot of these programs were so slow to sort of roll out and are still not completely rolled out. But we just were very surprised to find very little activity on the part of cities to try to get organized and coordinate internally on how to attract those dollars or compete for those dollars. We also found, looking outside of the jurisdiction or outside of the city building or city hall, that cities by and large lacked partnerships in their community for a lot of the kinds of initiatives that were going to be funded. So the infrastructure bill, for example, focused on electric vehicle rollout and electric vehicle infrastructure. And cities, by and large, had very few partners they were working with to try and develop the infrastructure, or where to site, or where to build, or to convert fleets into EVs, or how to communicate this with the public. So cities did report a small number of partnerships with other counties, school districts, universities. Occasionally, there was some coordination with regional planning organizations, but by and large, this was not very extensive. So these are also a source of potential, obvious potential future resources for communities. All right, next slide, please. So the last thing I want to leave you with here from the study is this somewhat confusing sort of statistical demonstration of collaboration networks. And so what we're looking at here are cities that did and did not have a dedicated sustainability unit. So the blue dots are the cities that did have a sustainability unit. And then on the right, the red dots are cities that do not have a sustainability unit. And what these dots are plotted against on the y-axis is the size of their collaboration network. So who are they collaborating with, and the number of partners that they're collaborating with. And then on the x-axis, what is plotted there are the number of units or departments inside the city that are involved in EV activities. So we have the EV network and then the number of internal departments involved. And what we find is that cities, of course, that have sustainability staff or have that capacity have a larger network. So they work with more partners external to the city, and they have more departments involved on average, right? And that's a statistically significant difference. So this is not, the end of the world if you do not have a sustainability unit, but our survey found very clear evidence that having that unit did make it more likely you were going to be able to build a collaborative network, a larger collaborative network that we all probably intuitively know makes a huge difference in the ability to roll out and implement a lot of these projects. So collaborative networks make a big difference. All right, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Catherine. Thank you all very much.
Great, thank you, Aaron. You know what we forgot to do at the beginning? We wanted to do a quick poll to see kind of who's in the room, and I realized it might be a bit late for Aaron's part, but it'll help me understand. So could we just get a show of hands for if you work for local government? Okay, got 3, 4-ish. Got that was an unsure kind of hand. Nonprofit. 5, 6. If I'm not, sounds like you don't fall into these neat categories, and that's totally fine. University, sorry.
That's you.
Okay. Private sector. Okay. Federal. I see some FEMA. Okay. Great. Who am I missing? Great.
Regional Planning Commission.
Regional, I'm so sorry. I love regional planning. So, my bad. Great. Okay, great. Very diverse group. So I'm here to talk about a project that the Great Plains Institute worked on with, or is still working on with ACEEE. It's something that we're calling Midwest 4, funding our rural regions. You'll hear me say rural, but it's kind of shorthand. We're really trying to, figure out how to best support limited capacity communities overall. And yeah, so I talked about GPI a little bit, but again, based in Minneapolis, working across the country. We've got 5 teams working at, across different emission sectors at all different levels of government. I'm on the communities team, and we work closely with local governments, community organizations, really technical assistance, any way that we can best support local action on climate and clean energy. So I facilitate a couple of networks of Minnesota local government staff working on sustainability, one of local elected officials working on climate, and I'm going to talk about this network that's more of a regional group, just getting started, of technical assistance providers that are working to support limited capacity communities on this question of accessing federal funding. So, I know we're not the only ones to be thinking about this potential pinch point with implementation of IIJA. That's kind of how this project got started. GPI was working with ACEEE and trying to figure out how do we best support communities that, as Aaron said, maybe had never applied for a federal grant before, or didn't have capacity to do it. How do we best support them as kind of technical assistance providers? And so got some support from the Energy Foundation to work on this project. And the main goals were to do some education and outreach to communities about how to best use IIJA opportunities, and then later IRA once that legislation was passed, how to use those new opportunities to support climate mitigation and resilience projects. And the second goal was to kind of identify the organizations like ours who are working to support communities, to build capacity in whatever way they could, and to convene them across the region, because we know that you might be working on similar fact sheets, similar funding trackers. How can we not duplicate efforts and really work together across the region, and kind of acknowledge similar challenges that we could help each other address. So one of the kind of deliverables from this project, I guess, is kind of a working directory, very much still working in draft form right now, kind of a directory of technical assistance providers who are working to support limited capacity communities to access this funding. And we're using this TA providers pretty broadly. We know there are a lot of organizations who are supporting communities in some way. So there are nonprofits working at a regional and national scale, but state-based nonprofits as well. We've got regional planning entities, rural economic development entities, state agencies, extension service, universities, a lot of different players in this realm. So we're trying to get a sense for, who is in this space, and then also what are they doing specifically on this question of IIJA and IRA programs and resources. So still work in progress, like I said, but kind of trying to, one, help technical assistance providers connect with one another, eventually to help communities, have access to a list like this. But another goal was to kind of elevate some of these organizations for philanthropic funders, because we know a lot of funders typically have established relationships with policy advocacy organizations, which is great and fine, but they might not have strong relationships with these entities that have the really close relationships with rural and other limited capacity communities. So those rural economic development agencies who already do grant writing and planning with small communities. Maybe they haven't worked on climate and energy so much in the past, but they could, and with additional capacity, could really make a difference in implementing some of this federal legislation. So trying to elevate groups like that to funders. I think that's all I'll say about those. Another part of the project, like I said, was to identify those groups. So we did a series of relationship building calls over the past year, asking everyone, who in your state do we need to be talking to, who wants to come to this regional convening, did some web research, and I know we still miss people, so would love to connect with folks afterwards if you're interested in getting involved. But we hosted a meeting in September of last year just to get some representation from each state to understand what are the unique community needs in your state? What exciting resources and programs are you working on to help folks take advantage of the new federal funding opportunities? And again, not wanting to duplicate efforts across the region, how can we, what are the resources that we can share, what can we replicate, and things like that. I will say that, okay, gotta make sure I do this list right. We had Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, I'm sorry, Missouri. We've already talked to Heather that next time we seek funding for Missouri too. Midwest definitions are interesting. But anyways, after that convening, had a lot of good conversations. The group decided, we want to keep meeting. And so we have established this kind of loose regional network that we're calling Midwest 4. Like I said, I have a little Google group listserv to share resources, ideas, events, and that kind of thing. So one of the resources that maybe a lot of you have heard of is this University of Michigan IIJA funding tracker that was really targeted at local governments and tribes. And this was super popular at our first meeting, and so we hosted another call to, walk through their methodology and see if other states were interested in doing something similar. It already led to some conversations in Minnesota about how we can collaborate with state agencies on doing some closer tracking of the different opportunities and outreach associated with that. Had another meeting in January, again, sharing some resources that could be used across the region or replicated. Had a presentation on preparing communities for, for future grant applications, getting registered on SAM.gov, reaching out to project stakeholders right now, going back through your capital improvement plans or other plans and seeing what might be, what might align with some of the opportunities that are out there. And then we had some breakout discussions based on what, some needs that we've been hearing. One is to help communities navigate Justice 40 goals. And so, different federal agencies have different mapping tools and kind of definitions of a disadvantaged community. How do we help our communities understand how to meet those goals, how to make sure that 40% of the benefits of these investments go towards disadvantaged communities? So yeah, we didn't come up with any answers to that, but a topic that we want to keep exploring. Okay, so that was kind of what we did with this project. So lessons learned. I love a good online poll. So here are Mentimeter screenshots. So we asked our attendees kind of what is needed across the region, and more coordination. People are interested in continuing to meet, networking amongst the state agencies. State agencies are the ones that are figuring out how a lot of this money is going to be passed down to communities, and it's helpful for them to talk with other states, so we can provide that venue. This one about solution sharing geared towards really small cities, really rural areas. I think it's important to mention because there's a spectrum. We could say limited capacity, but really rural community of 2,000 people is different than a community of 30,000 even. So it's a focus on that. What do you need in your individual state? I love this one. It's just money, exclamation point, straight to the point. More capacity, and again, greater communication and coordination within states and between states. This might be a bit repetitive, but we kind of confirmed what we thought at the outset, and what Aaron had talked about. Very limited staff and even volunteer capacity to secure this funding. Smallest rural municipalities, just a handful of staff, and just trying to make the city run, and maybe don't have the bandwidth to really think about even climate mitigation or resilience. So how do we support them? A lot of these opportunities require a match, as we know. Some states are really getting prepared. Minnesota is considering legislation to establish a fund for matching, to provide match for these federal grants, but not all states are thinking about that. Once you get the grant, it's difficult to manage it and do the reporting. There's a lot of work associated with that. So are there ways that we can support communities in that aspect? A lot of these small communities don't have a climate or an energy or even, a capital improvement plan that has like energy efficiency projects. So it's really hard to identify projects in time for some of these quick grant timelines, right? And so if communities don't have these plans, how are we going to help them identify projects? that's kind of local government needs. And then again, these technical assistance organizations, defined very broadly, also have limited capacity. Could use some help on that front. This one on the bottom left corner, I think is important to mention. You know, there's a lot we can do on tracking the opportunities, you know, sending out these spreadsheets, sending out action alerts. But there's another kind of level of knowing which are the right fit, right? So helping communities understand which would align with a given project that they have that they're thinking of. So a bit more hand-holding on that front. And so what we've, you know, really learned, every state that we worked with has a pretty robust group of organizations that are well positioned to support rural communities, smaller, limited capacity communities. They're not usually the advocacy groups, although there are advocacy groups who are doing a lot to support communities. But like I said, we've got this diverse group of state agencies, municipal leagues, I don't think I've mentioned yet, regional planning groups, extension, other university programs. And yeah, really diverse group. They might know each other within a state, but there's not a lot of coordination. I think this depends from state to state, but there could, you know, be more work to better coordinate. I would say even though we have more time to kind of keep tabs on all the different opportunities, it's still a lot of information to keep track of. You know, we've kind of confirmed that the regional connections are helpful. People like to be able to learn from other states, and so hoping to continue to provide that venue. You know, we wanted to ask the group how we want to continue collaborating, moving forward. A lot of interest in continuing to meet, share ideas and best practices, and some interest in like a simplified way to do climate planning or energy planning or whatever you might want to call it, but a way to identify, an easier way to identify projects, a concise planning process. Not everyone needs a 30-year long range, long and page numbers, the climate action plan. So can we help smaller cities, you know, create a plan that's right for them? And I think I'll, you know, don't need to run through all those. And again, just to emphasize kind of how we can support communities, just some ideas, and we're going to do some breakout discussions later about how this group can maybe work to support each other and support these communities. Building capacity, funding for grant writing, project management, and compliance. Boots on the ground was a phrase that one of our attendees used. Really helpful to have technical assistance providers who live in these communities, who can, like, you know, visit in person. Like I was saying earlier, it's Rural Economic Development Agency is already connected. And, you know, those relationships are invaluable. In-state coordination, like I was saying, the state agencies are going to be implementing some of these programs. How can we better support coordination for them to help do outreach, but to also help inform them about how to best structure these programs to make it easier for communities to apply and to access funding. We talked about simplified kind of grant templates, grant application templates, tools for energy, climate planning, like I said, and then really helping to do some of that hand-holding, that curated funding tracking of what actually aligns with our community's projects, rather than just this spreadsheet of 100 different grant opportunities. So, sorry, zoomed through that. And so now we have this kind of overview of that project, some of the needs that Aaron referenced and that I referenced. We're going to talk about just a few of the resources out there to help coordinate the support. So I'll turn it back over to you, Aaron.
Great, thank you, Catherine. So, I think if you've spent any time in this space over the last year or so, you realize that very quickly we're in a situation of information overload. There's simply too much information that is being piped out. There are over 50 or so requests for information, over 40 or so RFPs that have been released across several agencies. So there's a lot of information out there, and there are multiple efforts by different coalitions or networks to try and set up tools to help track the rollout of these two bills. There are over 100 or so new programs that are going to be created across the federal government to try to implement these projects or programs. So the best one we found so far, or that I found anyway, is called the Climate Program Portal. This is set up by a DC Atlas Research Institute, and you can access it through that code right there on the left. And it's a very, very useful tool. It's not, maybe it's not the best that's out there, but it's certainly the best that I've found for trying to track the rollout and announcements that different agencies are making, and to get a lot more specific information about the different opportunities. So can you switch to the next slide really quickly? So here's a snapshot of what you can do with this portal. You can track essentially all of the funding. As I mentioned, this is sort of updated every day by the institute that is running this portal. I should also mention that this portal is free to subscribe to. You just have to be involved in some way in trying to help the rollout of the bill. So if you are an NGO, if you are a university employee, if you are a MPO employee, if you work for a community-based development organization, any of those kinds of nonprofits or entities or organizations that are attempting to help roll out the legislation or roll out the bill, you just have to apply. They evaluate and make sure you are who you say you are very quickly, and then they let you into the portal. So this is one of the ways that they track the spending across the bills. They have identified everything that is from either bill or IRA that is climate related, and they've identified $581 billion across both of the pieces of legislation, 142 new programs, 70 existing programs, and then they provide the average federal cost share there of 76%. So heavily leaning on the federal side. And a lot of that cost share is related to transportation projects, right? That were kind of in the early rollout as part of the infrastructure bill. So a lot of the IRA programs have essentially no cost share. They're all federal funding for the most part. Next slide, please. So you can tailor the search for local governments as recipients, or other types of recipients. We have a couple questions already about, how do we find access, or how do we access programs, that are specific to entities that may not be, municipal governments, or may not be, state or local governments. And you can sort of filter by recipient. So you can filter for programs that are available to individuals, to local governments, to tribal governments, to NGOs, to others, right, to state governments, to territorial governments, tribal governments, as I mentioned, utilities. So you can select with filter, right, to look at programs that target very specific subsets of recipients. And this is what you get when you filter for just local governments. So programs that are targeted to local governments as recipients, and you see there's $132 billion across 25 different programs. 25 new programs and 13 existing programs. All right, next slide, please. You can also track each of the individual programs by their implementation deadlines. So whenever a new solicitation comes out, you get you get an update on that as soon as it's released. And then you also get the deadline for when if it's a request for proposal of an RFP, when those proposals or applications have to be submitted by. So you can also look ahead and see when specific projects or when specific programs are supposed to come out. So for example, one of the largest programs at EPA is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a $27 billion program, with $7 billion of that targeted to state, local, and tribal governments. We knew that was going to be rolling out in mid-February, for several months, because the legislation spelled that out, and you could just see that kind of approaching in using this tool, using the portal. So you knew that around mid-February we were going to get more guidance from EPA on what that was going to look like, and sure enough, last week that information came out. Next slide, please. Lastly, I wanted to point out that this is not the only portal, right? There's a lot of portals that are popping everywhere. Catherine mentioned the Michigan one, but we also have portals that have come up in Iowa, Minnesota, Indiana, Wisconsin. The portal that we are working on at Indiana University at the Environmental Resilience Institute it's still under development, but it is going to be a kind of full service center or hub for helping resource constrained communities actually apply for grants and then implement those projects. So we'll submit the goal is to submit somewhere around 7, 8, or 9 sort of project proposals or develop those over the course of this year for communities that otherwise would not be able to do that. So there's a lot of different kinds of functionality across these different sites. Some of them are just providing information. Some of them are getting set up to try and actually provide technical assistance of various types to communities. At this point, I will pass it back over to Catherine.
Thanks, Aaron. So I think the web, is this better?
Is it better?
Web portals are awesome. Another one that kind of, I think, spans this information portal and technical assistance provision, like Aaron just mentioned, is this Ohio one. Power Clean Future Ohio has this infrastructure grant assistance program. National League of Cities has this is a national one, but they've got this great local infrastructure hub portal. But they also have a grant application boot camp where they have boot camps where you can kind of form a city team and apply to participate. It's free of charge besides some staff time, of course. But basically they walk you through for a specific federal funding opportunity, walk you through grant applications. I think they did Safe Routes to School, the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, and I think they've got some other cohorts coming up, but really unique opportunity. In Minnesota, the League of Minnesota Cities has this Grant Navigator program where they're providing grants of $5,000 to communities to hire a consultant to do some of the grant research, kind of find the opportunities that align with the community's interests, and help them kind of outline a proposal and kind of get them ready to apply. A great web resource that I really love is this American Cities Climate Challenge Renewables Accelerator. They had a federal funding learning series that helped me really understand the IRA provisions, some of the tax credits, kind of how municipalities can now, invest in their own renewable energy facilities, whereas before they might have needed to do a power purchase agreement. Now they can have their own through these direct pay provisions, things like that. So there's so many other ones. I'll mention some fact sheets from our partners, ACEEE, focused on rural communities and some case studies on how communities have used federal funding in the past. A lot more in development. I'm sure I know I've missed some, and more still to come, I'm sure. So there's a lot out there, and I think speaks to kind of the coordination that's helpful in sharing these, and making sure we're not duplicating efforts. And with that, I'll turn it over to McKaylin.
Hi, thank you, Catherine. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So as she mentioned, my name is McKaylin. I work for the city of Bloomington, Indiana. I'm the Sustainability Program Coordinator in the Department of Economic and Sustainable Development. I've been with the city for about 9 months now. And basically I have been working to help facilitate and manage the programs that we have in place in support of our climate action plan at the city. So luckily, both Aaron and Catherine have set me up absolutely perfectly to attest to and speak to everything that they have already spoken to. Bloomington is a perfect case study of kind of that progression from limitations in funding to now limitations in staffing. So Bloomington is kind of in a unique position of its own, but one that I think a lot of other local governments and communities are going to start to feel with Inflation Reduction Act funding. So looking back at funding for the city of Bloomington, within the last 3 years, our funding amount and the number of funding sources has more than quadrupled, while the number of dedicated sustainability staff has grown by 1. So that is cause for a lot of capacity limitations in terms of trying to manage everything that's coming in. So when we look at 2020, the only source of funding that we had was a general fund, which was, less than $300,000. Had some federal funding from ARPA in support of sustainability. And so, that was pretty manageable. We were able to get some really good programs off the ground. But now looking at 2023, in addition to all of the federal funding that's coming down to local governments, Bloomington also recently established a now consistent source of federal fund or of sustainability funding at the city level that goes beyond just the general fund. So each year now we have about 1.6 million specifically that has to go towards sustainability efforts. So in addition to that, the general fund, any remaining federal funding from previous years, and now the upcoming historically unprecedented amount of federal funding that's going to be coming to local governments. We have a lot of money to manage, which, when you first look at is a really, really exciting problem to have. But when you are one person or two people, as most of us are, as Aaron has kind of spoken to in terms of other cities' capacity limitations, that can be very overwhelming to try to manage effectively and efficiently. So this is kind of Bloomington's current position. And then if we want to go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about Bloomington's perspective on our coordination needs to kind of help facilitate that discussion later on about where there might be overlapping opportunities to collaborate. So again, when we talk about there being two sustainability staffers, that's not just as simple as tracking the funding and then applying for it and then you start a program. There's a variety of steps that fall under each of those categories. So when it comes to tracking funding, we're not only talking about a bunch of different deadlines, whether that be when the funding starts, when you have to apply for, but also if you're eligible, is it coming to local governments or is it coming down through the state offices? Are only community-based organizations eligible to receive that funding? In that case, if it's a specific source of funding that falls within, your climate action plan or your organization's mission, is there a way to collaborate? And so then that kind of moves us into that step of project scoping for funding use, trying to work to identify partners, working on program development, because a lot of times for this funding, you have to have, a program proposal in place to actually apply for that funding. When it comes to applying for the funding, there's so much in terms of technical assistance, writing proficiency. A lot of us don't have a background in grant writing, federal funding opportunities. We're very sustainability focused. So that's an added level of skills that we need. And then even if we do secure funding, that then takes us into, well, now we have to actually launch these programs and we have to manage these programs to administer that funding out into our communities while we're also managing and launching other programs that aren't necessarily from that federal funding, managing past programs that we've already launched that are ongoing, and thinking about future ones, all while monitoring the success of current programs so that we can then do back-end reporting requirements for federal funding. So there is so much that is expected of 1 to 2 sustainability staffers. And this is where we get into this issue of capacity needs for small and limited capacity communities. If you go to the next slide. So Bloomington's approach to kind of trying to leverage federal funding and minimizing the administrative burden of all of those tasks is basically 3 key steps. 2 of them are very partnership focused, but just to start off, so when it comes to tracking funding, the main thing that we're doing is really just trying to utilize the resources available to us. Aaron and Catherine have both touched on really great resources that Bloomington has used time and time again to refer back to. But there's also just resources that you should tap into that are provided by organizations that actually have the capacity to effectively translate that funding legislation into digestible information. So, for a local government like ourselves, we have a membership to USDN and ICLEI. They provide ongoing webinars that are a little bit more specific and catered to local governments. They break things down a little bit further. I've also attended a number of really informational sessions from Bloomberg Philanthropies. that's been really helpful as well. And so just really tapping into the memberships that your organization has, the groups that you're a part of, whether that be at the regional level, the state level, the city level, nonprofit level, tapping into that, because those organizations, while you might not have the capacity to spend time breaking down all of this federal legislation, they might have somebody whose entire job is trying to make that digestible information for local governments, for nonprofits. And so really taking advantage of those resources is going to be very critical to eliminating the administrative burden that happens with that first step of tracking funding. For project scoping and then applying for funding, a lot of what we've been focusing on in terms of trying to boost our capacity and your competitiveness is with partnerships. So working to identify opportunities early on with other local governments, nonprofits, businesses, any other organizations that not only has shared goals, but also has shared capacity limitations. You know, relationship building is really key to being able to say, you know, I'm lacking in this area, but this is where we can help make up for it. So one example for the city of Bloomington and in the state of Indiana is there is some federal funding that's coming down that will be going to state energy offices. And so once we found that out, you know, Bloomington, I was like, well, we don't have really a relationship with our state energy office. And so we got in contact with some other cities and was like, hey, do you know the appropriate point of contact for the state energy office? I'd love to hear more about the funding that's coming down. And they were just like, nope, we don't have a relationship whatsoever. And then you sit in on other webinars and there's other cities that don't have any relationship whatsoever with their state energy offices. I think this is maybe common in the Midwest as well, more specifically, but all these cities that don't have relationships with the state energy office that's going to be getting really important funding related to, you know, residential energy efficiency. And so we reached out, all this like 5 partner cities, 5 cities across Indiana, reached out to the executive director of our state energy office and said, hey, we would love to just set up a meeting. We'd love to hear about this process and what you're learning about this funding and how we can help and how you can provide us with a little bit more guidance on that. And so we were able to sit down and not only gain more information about a specific source of funding, a specific program, but we were also able to hear from their perspective that they have the same exact capacity limitations that the state energy office has gone from, you know, very minimal funding to a lot of funding that they're also trying to manage, that they also have limited staff, and that this isn't something that they've done before. And so the programs that the federal funding that's going to the state energy office is supporting is programs very similar to some of the things that we've already launched in Bloomington. And so we were able to say, look, this is what we've done. This is where we've seen success. This is where we've seen opportunities for growth. And we were not only able to gain more information, but we were also able to have some impact, some influence, and some insight into what this could end up looking like once we do receive that funding, while that funding is still, you know, kind of being determined at the federal and state level. And so that relationship building, again, is really key for project scoping and getting a better understanding of how to apply for that funding. And then, at the sake of being somewhat redundant when it comes to managing funding and programs, again, partnerships and collaboration is absolutely the name of the game for us. Co-management of programs, once we have funding and we're going to launch programs and administer funding out into the communities, having, whether it be businesses, nonprofits, other local governments to learn from, just helping and facilitating and co-managing those programs really, really helps mitigate capacity issues. And it can also provide community co-benefits, which I want to go into a little bit more on the next slide regarding our SEAL program in Bloomington. So just to provide a little bit of a case study into what Bloomington has been doing to try to effectively kind of manage some of our programs. The SEAL program, which stands for Solar Energy Efficiency and Lighting, it launched in 2021 as the Solar Energy Efficiency and Loan Program, which provided discounted loans and $10,000 grants to nonprofits to invest in energy efficiency and solar installations. we have revamped it in 2022 to now extend eligibility to small businesses. And in order to see kind of the acceleration of investment in solar, we have boosted that solar grant amount to $25,000. And so when it comes to managing this program, we have 4 program partners that help us in this endeavor. So CDFI Friendly is a nonprofit and financial partner. They assist in loan and grant dispersal because that can be kind of a tedious process at the city level. And so that helps save us time, helps get funding out quicker. And they are also a partner that can provide flexible financing to nonprofits. We also work with a nonprofit called IFF. They are our partner in the program by providing energy efficiency assessments to participants. That is part of the funding, so to speak, provided by the program. The city covers energy efficiency assessments for all participants. And then they provide professional guidance on determining a project. They're also available as a lending partner if people wanted to use financing for nonprofits. And so they're our nonprofit partner. Hoosier Hills Credit Union is another financial partner that provides loans at a discounted interest rate for SEAL participants. And then this year, kind of seeing that we want to expand solar, but we also want to mitigate any kind of supply chain issues or just the issues with determining a contractor and who's available, who's not. We were able to go through the process of selecting a local solar installer, MPI Solar, who is in Bloomington. Again, kind of going back to how you can create those community co-benefits and really invest in the local economy with these partnerships. They are the official solar installer of our program starting in 2023. So any participant who is wanting to select solar as opposed to energy efficiency will receive a solar feasibility assessment from MPI Solar, and they're also the sole project installer. And so we're seeing a lot of success with our SEAL program in the city of Bloomington, and each year we learn more about how to make that more successful. But, you know, it's essentially to the point now where we've been able to automate processes and also kind of co-manage these programs in a variety of different ways in order to kind of relieve some of the administrative and time-consuming burden that comes with trying to manage these programs. And so that's just one example of how we're trying to manage the amount of funding that's coming down in an effective way. So I think that's all from me.
Thank you. Okay, I think we still do have some time. We're hoping to do some breakout groups. I think we have some people online, so we'll probably have just a single online breakout group that Michaela and Aaron can facilitate. Our idea was to maybe have some of like the local government staff have a table and discuss really, you know, how are you navigating, prioritizing all these new opportunities? What do you need from the Midwest Climate Collaborative? What do you need from nonprofits, from state agencies, from regional, from universities? Just a chance to, you know, make those asks, I guess. And then kind of maybe everyone else, how can we in our unique roles and positions better support communities in accessing these funding opportunities? So I think maybe we'll take like 15 minutes for those discussions and have kind of a report back session. Do we have any questions come in on?
Yes, some of them have been answered. Thank you, Aaron, for going through that. The report that he talked about will be available soon, and he put a reply in there for anyone else interested in getting that. There is a question about community organizations or coalitions who are not a registered organization of sorts, or if they are a coalition made up of different organizations. Do any of you have ideas about how they would go about seeking out this funding or applying?
A community coalition of
different nonprofit organizations and government organizations.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's not like a technically registered organization, and there's not one organization that's able to feasibly, you know, apply for the grant individually to support the coalition. So are there options to actually seek funding?
Got it, yeah.
Apply, yeah.
Aaron or McKellen, feel free to jump in, but I feel like a lot of them, you'll need maybe like a primary applicant. So if there's not one in your coalition, maybe this is, maybe this could be a good opportunity to like kind of seek out someone to be the lead on it. But I mean, I would say that a lot of the opportunities that I've been seeing like really value the collaboration and like having a lot of partners in the room. So I think that's just a strength for you. But I would say typically you need, someone to be the prime applicant. Maybe we could talk more about that. Michaela or Aaron, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just second what you said. I think there's a lot of opportunities that seem like with the federal funding that's coming down, they do want to enhance that collaboration side of things. And so one example of something that we're currently looking into is we have a commission on sustainability at the local government that wouldn't be they're not a community-based organization, so to speak, and they're not local government necessarily. This is, kind of a volunteer side of things. And they have a lot of really great ideas of things that they want to do in the community. And so I'm trying to help facilitate with them how they can link with other community-based organizations that are eligible to apply for that funding, and then seeing how the city can also help facilitate that and help apply for that funding and help support them and give them a stronger application without having to bear all the responsibility of managing that kind of a program. And so again, I think that just comes down to finding appropriate partners and finding appropriate opportunities to take advantage of when it comes to, eligibility issues.
Awesome. And Michaela, you have a question specifically for you in the HUVA Q&A about Bloomington's partnership with Hoosier Hills Credit Union. How does that work?
So I saw that we do have a loan loss reserve for whoever had asked that question. And so we have that, and then we've kind of negotiated a 0.5% discounted interest rate for anybody that receives a loan as a SEAL program participant. They also have partnered with us in another one of our programs for residential energy efficiency and solar, again, providing that discounted interest financing, flexible financing opportunities for residents who are wanting to invest in similar types of projects, energy efficiency and solar. But they also function really well for programs that would like to verify a certain level of income. If you're trying to target low income communities or low income neighborhoods in your community, they can verify income and help out in that way as well. So financial partners have been really useful for us in all the programs that we've used so far.
Thank you. Okay, so with our remaining time, let's split up into some groups, and maybe I'll expand the local government group too. If you're working for a local government or another organization that might be applying for federal funding, and then we'll probably have a few groups of kind of the supportive organizations. So remind me where our local government folks are. Does it make sense to? Oh, you're all split up. Okay, should we maybe congregate over here, and then we'll create some other tables for supportive groups. Does that sound good? Thank you. Good. Okay, I think we have to make room for you all on here.
I don't know. It's getting disbanded.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know what group I usually in. I feel I'm a small nonprofit. I relate to being a very limited resource organization that's trying to manage funding sometimes. I wonder if we all challenged by it.
On the Sustainability Commission, she's also here at the Office of Sustainability in WashU.
Oh, okay, good.
Hi, everybody. Should we like go around and introduce ourselves quickly? Yeah. Okay. Kamna, you wanna start?
Okay.
Thank you for all my
For the students, the breakout rooms, and I can't see.
I also work at WashU. I'm with Earth Dance Organic Farm School. I'm the development director, so we teach aspiring growers of all ages about organic farming, which is my facility specialist for the city of Centerville. Hi, I'm Freddie, Pacifica Branch.
That's really awesome. So what are you all?
Working with the Missouri Gateway Green Building Council.
I'm Angie Cott.
And I'm a member of, and we're the member of the St. Louis Healthy Home Community Coalition. So that was my question. We don't have a single organization that can fit possibly, or necessarily a leader.
Asmer, I'm the chair of the
Tracy, and I'm with
Commission.
Federal Highway Administration, USDOT.
Mike Piper also went through.
We put together our statewide collaborative that monitors and so far. And, I guess I was kind of like, which side am I on? Kind of administer the grants. But yeah, it's a plethora of, I mean, as you can see, it's like a fire hose that's coming out, every week. There's new programs, I'd say.
Great.
Just trying to help people
Is Mandy
navigate
here
through that
by
will
chance?
be an effort. I really like that.
I'm Rowan Golden. I am a student at Wilson College.
I think that'll be really good.
Thank you.
My name is Nick Arp with Guarantee Electrical Company. We're a local electrical contractor service provider, so kind of boots on the ground when it comes to some initiatives.
I'm just covered at the moment.
I'm also representing the Upper Midwest Association of Campus Sustainability, so we're a group of regional universities kind of collaborating on
Events that are out there, but more so on the local
We're
and
drinking
utility
out
side.
of a fire.
So that's
Business
our
partner.
business partner.
Coming from Kansas City, we do.
And we have a local venture organization.
I'm a third year majoring in environmental.
It's called the Foundation for Regeneration.
Yeah.
And we're doing like what we call climate smart economic
Coordinating
development.
and partnering.
My name is Malik Ryan. I'm the director of Building Energy Solutions, which is part of a growing network of project efficiencies.
We're really interested, well, we took so we took a area of the city that called the Blue River Valley.
That we're
and we were doing it
identifying
like,
some of those opportunities is
side
that we have a local
used to be an economic engine of the city, now it's
like a task force that's
local
recommending things that we apply for, so I think that is
a lot of
helpful.
work there.
And it gives staff, because there's two of us, I've been there for
So how do
almost
we
6
turn
months,
the
and my
waste
colleague has
streams
been there for a
into
year and a half, to be able
valley
to kind of identify if those then are a good fit and something that we should apply for, and we both applied for our first federal
The
grant.
latest is on
Um,
black soldier flies that eat food waste.
Recycling education
And
and
they're a good
outreach grant,
source
so
for
I think we're, again, kind of similar to what you were saying, is just trying to kind of pull all of those things together and identify which ones are gonna be the best fit. And like each CBG,
Yeah,
like
so
we
we're
know that
doing,
we
we have our hands in a lot of
have that
things.
already set aside, so that's kind of a no-brainer, but like what are the other ones? And then also acknowledging the fact that there's only two of us, how do we, and once those programs get rolled out, or if we get the funding, like how do we manage that?
I guess I'm just a little bit jaded in the sense that I'm not sure that the best projects get the funding with the scorecard. I was curious to know about that.
So it's about 50 people, but they're divided themselves up into different areas like waste and energy, buildings and development, so there is a little bit of a focus too. So specifically that waste group that kind of came to us and said, hey, we should consider applying for this grant.
Decisions doesn't necessarily mean that the project is getting funding, doesn't mean that they're not.
Anyways, I went down there.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just kind of like a drop in the bucket.
And Illinois.
So one of the things I do at Green Hill is
just launched a regional climate collaborative, so this is a cross-sector strategy for bringing together.
100, like closer to 150 residents, so definitely more capacity, but we don't have a ghostwriter, like I said, that was the first, I know that was the first federal initiative that opened up the sustainability team had submitted, so just trying to navigate and do a deep dive into all the tools and information for local jurisdictions. I felt like that was pretty much all I was doing.
So
where are you located?
Oh, I'm based
To
in
get that
Cincinnati.
thing submitted.
We serve 10 counties in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. So I also get to grapple with 3 different state policies. That's really fun. 3 states that are kind of racing to the bottom sometimes. But yeah, I think you know, one thing that we're doing is you can come to my session at 11 to learn more about basically. We're trying to fill that staff capacity gap by bringing in fellowships, providing trainings, and actually inciting
racial
funding that process. We actually just got an EPA and FEMA grant to be able to bring in some resources to electrification on the EPA side, as well as equitable community engagement and education on the NOAA side. And we applied for those grants because those were things I've spent about 2 years listening to local governments to be like, what do y'all want? And frontline community-based organizations to see, what do you guys want? And I feel like one way Midwest Climate Collaborative can support us, where we're more than boots on the ground.
Historically help smaller communities apply for grants and things like that. So we do have kind of an established relationship.
Solar projects
with
with
the
for
Department
profit.
of Natural Resources. For health, there's a lot of people come through them. But we ourselves are still kind of searching for
trying to
how do we sort of keep track of everything that's going on and all the opportunities. I think that's part of the role that we're hoping the MCC
for-profit firms understand that money's out there
for information. These are the current opportunities and deadlines that you can apply.
Another thing that we do, so that's kind of at the staff capacity level, and another thing we do is we try to train elected officials to actually care about these
I
issues.
did like when she mentioned the meeting that they set up with their state.
What's that like?
It seems like
So I
that
provide
could be
educational
helpful,
sessions.
and also maybe with the State Department's
By designers, we get asked sometimes to help provide a narrative, or help tell the story, graphics of what the vision is.
Platforms.
To your point about
Great success in some
criteria, also
jurisdictions.
checking as many boxes as required,
State reps
I have found, so
in Ohio when we piloted
award
it
is also based on
because I don't know
relationships.
if you've seen how corrupt our state is, but.
The people.
Okay, yeah, so we're trying to catch up to you guys.
But as far as I know, because I was in a meeting with Heather and Aaron talking about this, I don't believe that we have one with the Department of Energy.
I was hoping we could work.
So I think it could be helpful to start that.
I feel like we're all like pioneers. We really don't know with this landscape, with all of this funding available, like, which way do we go?
So I've been like a part of conversations with both HUD and Department of Health and Human Services, like at federal level, technical capacity that they're supposed to be offering the region around, one around what we've seen, climate resiliency, the other is how the impacts of climate change. And as like when you have these kickoffs that are more specific, already are rated higher, but it's really, that doesn't necessarily address some of the other needs, so they're so specific. It just sounds like everybody's might not necessarily trying to figure it out, so very, very broad, vague. We're gonna be here to support you, but I guess some of these regional coalition things are gonna be working out together to figure out what specific support, so it feels.
Is really critical, and a lot of the programs
That
are
feels
wanting to serve
the language is being
communities that are serving low to moderate
very
income
broad.
BIPOC residents, so that's.
That was like the Wild Wild West, where they're just like, figure out how to like coordinate across 8 states. It's just like, they want local partners like us to be able to do that, and just like, they didn't provide any, like
connectivity resources to even begin bridging those types of connections, and it was just like
Right.
word of mouth.
Dealing with them.
I know they're struggling with capacity.
Details a
like,
little bit.
generally, that's not like,
Yeah.
we're hiring 2,000 people.
So most of us are not
Taking
grant,
your time doing the grant writing.
Contact there, so I think there's
Used to
someone
issuing
that
grants,
we
we
could
used
reach
to
out to.
regulate.
Yeah, we've heard that
Very
there
much
come
what
up
they
a lot. I
do.
feel like kind of relates relationship.
I'd say, yeah, you mentioned, how do you
Yeah, it's hard
get
to know like
information?
where that alignment
Another
is,
way,
how
in addition
competitive we're gonna
to
be,
some
and
of the resources that they've
spend our
mentioned
time,
is,
like,
getting
go
on,
out for it and
if you're energy related, whatever, I mean, I'm transportation, so at USDOT, if
do
you're
this
interested
kind
in
of scale of
infrastructure,
like
I mean, they have a really good,
vibes like that.
website, I mean, it's all linked right there, and you can actually sign up and be notified of different things, so that's good. A lot of presentations are made available,
Flooding mitigation, we spend a lot of time
they
to
record the
dig in,
webinar,
figure out what exactly our public transit.
so
Right.
there's a lot more
We can
different
identify that
opportunities,
into,
I
like,
think,
a
than
fast
ever
track
before.
way
Now
to
I'm gonna tell you the
do
bad
it.
side of things, is that every program that I've reviewed, raise grants and build grants and so forth over the years. And what's
Like just a few of the ones that we know.
interesting and tragic is that,
the
they're complicated, and then you have, say if it's
we're really trying to be like, okay, this is
you
something
have,
that we know.
build, I mean, it's
Well, we don't know all the guidance yet.
first, because there's only so much, even though the numbers are big, when you look at the geography of our country, there's a lot you're drawing from.
So that.
So you might have, if they're oversubscribed,
Energy,
generally.
I think quite a few
Now, some of these
subcommittees
are
right going right
new
now.
and energy related might be different.
And one of them is stormwater management,
You might get
and revisiting a
10
plan that
money
is
that you have, and
two
then,
thousand two.
Instead of trying
legislator
to
comes out and
Can
goes,
we
oh,
do
we
leadership?
this like a lot of
or whomever, and if they're not happy, and
Being able
the
to
problem
have
with that is you
leaders
cannot make
some
everyone
space
happy.
to implement
our
these
resources.
Because not everybody is gonna do it.
Amna and I are working
That's
on
the hard part, and then the other paradigm
yeah,
shift is
pedestrian
looking,
safety.
and we don't know
Traffic
exactly what
Advisory
equity
Commission.
means.
So there's just so many collaborative efforts
I
that
mean,
we're trying to focus
but
on, and
there's a lot of
Western
layers there
Unified
too,
plan,
like,
it's
well, what
very
does that
loose,
really
there's
mean?
aren't like
Capacity in this area.
data metrics
And
and
geography,
things that
I
we're
mean,
measuring by, but it's more
generally, if you
like
look at
theme and
the
ideas.
winners, if you look at the
Because
map of the country,
that's
it's not all
kind
one
of like
size.
where
I mean, usually
the
they
expertise
have
that the
things
commission
around.
can bring,
And
you know,
honestly,
we're a
I may
volunteer
review
group.
something technically.
I wonder if there's a way to.
And right now,
Way
there's no
higher than my pay grade.
Useful
Somebody in
for other-
Washington
dedicated to
probably is gonna
helping
make
us
it.
through this.
So I'm just saying, reality is, there's so many layers
You know,
that
at his own capacity.
you could
and
write
how
the
we
best
can
grant,
continue
but you may
to
not
move
write
forward.
it. But there's so many factors, like you're saying.
Stormwater management, food waste,
Relationship with the five,
and,
four versus the three, whatever.
we're focusing
That's
on
probably
right now.
one thing, I hate to
What's the other reason?
say, you
It was
gotta
like,
play that game, but
Neighbor
probably doesn't hurt to
development.
go right the year of the right
Things like,
person.
oh, our entity was in California, not Missouri, or,
I mean, I think
So
most people
anyways,
here are very pure in thought and
it's-
saying, hey, we wanna, we
a lot
wanna do a
clearer.
good job, we wanna help
I mean,
people.
it's
So
Part
this
of,
is,
I've been
this
trying
is
to
new,
find-
that's why, this is how I know Mandy.
this is
Yeah.
a very different organization.
We're starting Mid-County Sustainability Consortium. And so it's Webster, Richmond Heights, Clayton, Maplewood, and Brentwood. And we've been meeting with Jean Hunzi and Mandy LeBrier, who's Director of Sustainability in the county. And so that's new, and we're trying to kind of like figure out how to best utilize, we're actually meeting tomorrow.
All right, everybody, we're gonna come back together
You better
soon.
get it, otherwise you probably aren't gonna have fun.
Anyway, so that's really
Anyway, I
exciting
started
because it's like we need to be building.
That's the other side of this coin.
So if like the collaborative did like, I guess share like a directory of grants or just resources.
Well, I think the one that they said was really good. But sign up for any listserv you can get on, if it's an area that's interesting.
Actually awarded it.
Currently an unfilled
Then we
position.
discovered the county government
Fortunate timing.
has a lot of.
I think for us, the Office of Sustainability,
So
the idea
I
is sort of
approached them
that it
and.
touches a lot of
They
departments and
looked at
influences
our
them, and
proposal
some of
and
these grant
said,
programs,
yeah, please find some
without that
communities
kind of
and-
intake,
And submit to us. So.
not sure we're supposed to lead on some of those things that are new. And we also have almost
We had a
like a
consultant who
disproportionate.
had us write a grant without a grant application.
And that's.
So we had all this
we have,
language, and then
that's
when we looked
cash.
at the opportunities, we were able to do what you're saying. It's like, okay, yeah, and then customize it from there.
I'm starting to
We had
sense
like a
that
base.
some of these new programs You know, we're not.
It's a hustle, I mean, there's no other way to put it, but I just don't, I don't know, I'm more on the private sector because I understand it more. It's like, you can throw in.
Even, I think, City of St. Louis historically has been
The government wants to
super
hope for the
good
best,
going
but the
after
private sector, if you have your
grants.
T's crossed and you have it done the way they need it, then it makes sense and they'll do it. So it's
As a
more
group
reliable.
to find equity.
But you know, they say once in a generation
Would that
moment.
be something that would be
I just
helpful
hope
for
that
all
they're
of us?
not.
The same language to use.
All right, everyone.
A lot of these agencies.
public works.
Wrap up your last thought. We're gonna come back with the report out.
They have mapping, like,
So we're like,
you know,
okay,
so
so I
that when you
think
go
there's
to
a lot
apply, you
of,
can essentially overlay
you know,
your
get a
project
online group, how was your discussion?
area to see where it's gonna go. And in most areas, I mean, you kind of know.
Online group, can you hear me? Thumbs up?
There are a lot of open source things now that you can use, that you don't have to rebuild the wheel.
That's really cool.
We're trying to shift our advantage, you know, to that. I had the same.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't hurt, and I don't wanna be corny to
yourself,
say
but
it.
if you know
I
other
mean,
people
but I'm
who
just
might
saying-
be interested.
But it's different experience.
It's
Sometimes you just don't know what was the tipping point
connect, yes.
to get it versus not get it. There's so many programs that maybe won't be as difficult, but I know in transportation, it's still.
All right, everyone. Sorry to cut this off. I wish we had a bit more time. But we can maybe continue these conversations in the break before the next session. But I do want to do a quick report out. Just, you know, your favorite thing that you talked about at your table, any aha moments, and then we'll wrap it up. I have a few things to share at the end. But could I start with this group? This is our local government general group who's applying for grants. Let's hear what you're talking about.
I think, so from my perspective, we thought that Bloomington, Indiana's presentation was reflective of a lot of things that we're experiencing. Drinking out of a fire hose, not enough staff capacity, trying to navigate what our priorities should be. Historic investments with ARPA funding, making it, and with that having a deadline to spend down, are we even ready to research other opportunities? If you don't have a defined leader who's supposed to be looking at this, then it makes it hard within a governmental entity as to what what should you be prioritizing, because then there's a question of which type of department is it going to be under, planning or transportation, or so a lot of questions, but definitely partnerships, collaboration, working across municipal lines is going to be one part of a solution.
Anything you want to say to all the, supportive organizations? What kind of needs or what kind of help we can provide from nonprofits, universities, all these other groups?
Let's meet.
All right, this table. Aha moments.
I had some comments about, how important it is to have relationships in high places. So making sure that you're connecting to your federal representatives, and also just the importance of collaboration, not submitting proposals for a single entity, but for multiple entities, and making sure that we're all reading between the lines and reading the lines that are in the RFPs, so that we're not wasting time submitting proposals that may on the surface sound good, but when you dig into the details, really might not be as applicable.
And I'll give a shout out to the next session in this room. It's going to be on cross-sector collaboration, building capacity through that. So if you want to continue talking about that, they'll be in this room next. This table.
We kind of went sideways. We were talking about a travel climate symposium we'll be putting on this year, laying out some agendas, some speakers and stuff like that. So I acknowledge the fact that yes, the process is drinking off a fire hose. It's cumbersome, burdensome, and
I will just say, too, because I don't know that a lot of people know, but we have regional offices for Health and Human Services and also FEMA. And so we're here from the Region 7 office. We're located in Kansas City. And we worked together, FEMA and HHS, last fall to put on a Region 7 Climate Health and Emergency Symposium. And so if you're not connected through your state partners with the regional offices, it's a good point of contact. Just to kind of know who they are and reach out if you have questions. We have an EPA regional office, and they're actually downstairs at a table, and they're also able to serve as a resource and provide answers to questions, and they have a lot of technical assistance, webinars, and different things that they put on. So hello to everyone, just wanted to tell you who we are.
Thank you. Are you also?
I am HHS, Health and Human Services. So under this administration, they developed an Office of Climate Change and Health Equity. So our HHS umbrella, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, we work very closely with the new office, OCHI, out of headquarters, and we're working on climate change priorities. It's exciting time for us. It's new to be in this space, but we're excited to be here.
Cool. Great. All right, this table.
Notes for us. So we're a mix of nonprofits, business partners, students, and a Fed. So lots of interesting opinions on how the collaborative could support. Lots of discussion about sort of the challenge of, being boots on the ground folks and needing that support to better understand kind of what's happening at the state policy and coordination level to translate those resources down to the boots on the ground folks. Coordinating partnerships needed for regional grants, RFP deciphering. We shared about how for some of these large RFPs that are coming out from federal agencies, it's like the Wild West because they're asking for multi-state coordination and boots on the ground support. So it's like, how do you know who to even talk to? And then some conversation about shared lexicon, kind of defining key terms across our region, ensuring that, conversations are translatable across multiple states. And then, I think these types of kind of elucidating the nuance of how much work grant tracking and grant closing, who's going to be the sponsor of grants, kind of outlaying those types of processes could be important for us as well. I don't know if anyone else from the team wants to add.
How about online?
Yeah, online group.
All right, and from online, would anybody like to share out?
They're muted.
Oh my gosh.
And I can speak, I guess, on their behalf. We just discussed generally kind of carrying forward the difficulty of how to get the ball rolling on specific projects, because we have some participants from Cleveland and from the city of Carmel in Indiana, where there are going to be these activities going on, but it's difficult to sort of determine where to get started and how to start building kind of partnerships. That was the gist.
Thank you. All right, I know we're out of time. Say anything, we have one.
Yep. 30 seconds really quick. Thank you so much to everybody who is here and participating in the whole summit in this session. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everybody joining online as well. Again, this recording will be made available within the next few days, and it will be up on the Whova app that you already have access to for 3 months. Our next round starts at 11, and as Catherine mentioned, the next one in this room is all about that collaborating and capacity building, so more of this kind of conversation. Make sure to connect to one another on Whova. There is also a poll associated with this presentation asking what other resources do you need to do these kinds of things. If you want to throw something out there, as soon as the next session starts, I'll share out the results of that so everybody else can see it. If you want to do like a climate classified style at some point between sessions, you can list I am a blank looking for blank over there. All right, thank you so much. And we also, I learned, have a great local connector here. We have Nick. Is Nick still in the room? Nick, hi. You moved from over there. So if you would like to chat with someone local and you have a table downstairs.
We have a table downstairs, happy to talk about feasibility and budgeting for solar projects, EV projects, kind of that boots on the ground piece that may be missing. So we'll be downstairs.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.